The bark echoed in the metal chamber like a gunshot. It was so sharp, so full of fury, that the officers who spoke froze, their trays of coffee steaming in their hands. The echo hit the concrete walls, bounced off the cage doors, and ended in a thick silence, as if the entire battalion had breathed as one, and the air kept flowing. "That's right, isn't it?" the young man whispered, gripping the cardboard vase tightly. "The mayoralty won't be challenged immediately. You don't need to look it up to know what it was about. This kind of barking was unmistakable. It was a muffled roar, a courtesy and a plea all at once." "Yes," he finally replied, "it's Rex, the most aggressive one we have." The other one swallowed. "They say nobody can even get close." "No one," the veteran repeated, looking toward the end of the corridor, where a red light shone on the last cage. "And those who tried didn't ask for anything." Silence returned, but it wasn't true silence. It was the sound of a dog's labored breathing as it paced in circles, of nails tapping on the cement floor, of a taut chain occasionally striking metal, a presence that fills the air even without verses. After the beams of light, the white light falling more on one eye than the other, Rex didn't look at the officers. He looked at something that wasn't there. He looked through them, through the country, through a world he only remembered. The sand, the smell of fuel. The wind is warm, sticky, heavy with octopus and dried blood. It wasn't the cold hallway of the canine unit. It was something else, another time, where his human ran south, where the voice that meant safe, home, and okay came from the same throat. "Good boy, Rex, that's my champion." That voice, that tone, that peculiar accent mixed with mispronounced Spanish words. I didn't understand every syllable, but I understood the intention. I understood the rhythm of his breathing when something was about to explode. I understood the man's laughter when everything turned out all right. Rex grunted unconsciously, his lips barely moving. The memory always remains the same. First the desert, then that voice, then the creaking, the scream, the blood. After that, nothing. I opened my eyes, I didn't know when I had closed them, and the step was a step again. Cold concrete, the smell of chlorine, the aroma of cheap coffee from Lejano, and, enveloping everything, the metallic scent of its own cage. "Don't be there, don't stay with him," I called him mentally, but there was never an answer. That's why I bit. That's why I attacked. Because every time a human hand came near, its memory became confused, and the present blended with the last day in the desert. Their penises became famous in a few weeks. In the administrative sector, the reports include: transfer failed. Subject Rex, former military canine dog. History: traumatic loss of his handler in the line of duty. Observations: unpredictable behavior. Tendency towards aggression. Unfit for active duty. High personal risk. In other states, attempts were made to rehabilitate him, first in a small facility, then in a more specialized one. In each, there was a trail of bandages, stitches, and frightened eyes. Nobody could play it. Nobody could understand how to destroy the monster inside. And so I ended up there, in that police dog unit, in a forgotten corner of the city, surrounded by smaller cages, nervous barking, and boots that, incidentally, avoided him. As if the corridor became more comfortable when he was awake. The only one who wasn't afraid, although he pretended to be, was Mark. Mark stands before the record player with his rug, always the same. Patched blue shirt, worn black coat, a feather tucked behind his ear, and eggs that don't disappear until they're asleep. He walks with a studied gait, never hurried. I know dogs well enough not to give them bad signals. He wasn't a trainer, although he pretended to be, was Mark. Mark stands before the record player with his rug, always the same. Patched blue shirt, worn black coat, a feather tucked behind his ear, and eggs that don't disappear until they're asleep. He walks with a studied gait, never hurried. I know dogs well enough not to give them bad signals. He wasn't a trainer, but he knew more about those animals than many who spent years in his position. His official title was rather impersonal: Tactical Analyst and Canine Unit Coordinator. But in practice, he was the one who listened to the stories that were never included in the reports. I knew the dogs that aged prematurely patrolling overly violent areas, the ones that fell silent after a failed mission, the ones that continued searching each night for a dead comrade, sniffing the air as if his ghost were fading away. And I also knew of cases of humans who had self-destructed. He himself was a living example of that. When he looked in the bathroom mirror, he sometimes saw a competent officer. There was the man who had arrived late that night, who hadn't answered the phone, who had found the scene much later. You saw your hands stained with blood that wasn't yours, but you remembered how it had all happened that very day. Therefore, when she was assigned to review Rex's file, she sat down in front of the screen and took a deep breath. There were photos. In one of them, the dog appeared with his former caretaker. A broad smile, camouflage uniform, a few days' growth of beard, his arm around the German Shepherd's neck. Rex's tongue was out, his ears perked up, his chest puffed out with pride. An octopus floated in the air, and in the background, an orange sunset could be seen. In another, almost identical photo, the man was gone. Only a makeshift wooden cross and a hanging plate, gleaming in the same sun. And beside that cross, Rex lay on the ground, his head bowed, his gaze fixed on that patch of earth, as if something might spring from it at any moment. Mark needs to keep his gaze fixed elsewhere. The nakedness in his throat appeared unannounced. It wasn't just professional empathy, it was a reflection of it. The dog had lost his human in an instant. He had lost the person he loved most in a senseless moment. I had the feeling that if I could understand that animal, perhaps I would understand a little better what had been happening inside me for years. Therefore, he requested authorization to enter the high containment corridor. "Are you safe?" asked the unit leader, a huge guy with an unkempt mustache and a small scar under his left eye. "That dog is no joke, Mark. He bit the instructors at the other base. Here, he tried to attack the irrigation system when they were cleaning it." "I'm not going into the cage," Mark replied calmly. "I just want to see it, observe it. No one has bothered." The boss sees him as if he were looking at someone who is about to do something dangerous, not out of bravery, but out of necessity. "5 minutes," he finally stopped. "If you bark like that again, sell yourself. Of course?" Tick. As she walked down the hallway, the other dogs began to bustle about. Some were stealing, others were scolding. And still others were running excitedly at the sight of a familiar human. She glanced at them, offering a kind word to each, but without stopping. At the bottom, the red light shines on the reinforced door. It wasn't a simple gate with thick double beams and an inner bag that prevented anything, not feet, not legs, from escaping. "Rex," she murmured, but didn't confront him. I saw him before he stood in front of the door, a dark, heavy shadow moving inside the cage like a contained whirlwind. Quick steps, nails tapping on the floor, ragged breathing. Mark positioned himself to one side, about 1.5 meters away, turning his body slightly, avoiding eye contact. He knew that looking directly into their eyes, at the entrance, could be interpreted as a direct gaze. "Rex," he repeated, this time a little louder, in the tone of someone who spent too much time talking to beings that don't respond with words. "Calm down, buddy. I'm just watching." Inside the cage, Rex stopped dead in his tracks. His snout jerked up, sniffing. He didn't smell of oil, stale coffee, paper, fountain pen ink, or suppressed sweat. Someone who repressed intense emotions beneath a clean shirt. If you simply turned it around, you could see it with just one eye. That human wasn't built to guide him through the desert. No helmet, no bulletproof vest, no combat boots. He didn't shout orders over the burst of gunfire. He was sharp, quieter. But there was something about his stillness, as if he didn't tremble as he entered the door, that vaguely reminded him of those nights on guard duty, when his human sat beside him, simply breathing, simply being present. Rex growled, but this time I was lower down, a warning, not an attack. Mark keeps his gaze fixed on the animal's shoulder, not his eyes. "You look tired," I say to myself with disgust. Yes, I understand. It's just an instant, a few seconds, in which time seems to vanish. Neither the dog nor the man were in that hallway. Both were looking at someone who wasn't there. However, Rex was the first to return to the present. The loud slam of a metal door closing at the end of the cell in the trance bag. Your body tensed again. Your memories tangled once more. Roots swelled between your lips. A dry, brutal bark, ripped from the depths of your chest, shook the air once more. Mark took a step back, not out of fear, but out of respect. The echo rumbled. The other dogs grew restless. "Okay," he murmured, "not today." He turned around and went back, the weight of that gaze fixed on the back of his neck. That same afternoon, she received a message on her cell phone. A name, Emily. The subject, exceptional visit. I didn't know him personally, but I read his last name in Rex's file. She was the agent's widow. The woman who received the folded flag, the cold condolences, and the technical explanations for an absurd death on a confidential mission. Preserve the original language of someone who had to learn to walk without looking at the ground, even though it was full of pieces of glass. Her hair was styled, she wore a simple shirt, a simple t-shirt, jeans, a light headband, and her eyes were puffy. Not because she had been crying that morning, but because for 3 years she was followed by a crying that never completely disappeared. I came accompanied by a girl. Mark didn't wait for the little girl. The internal email only mentioned Sergeant Miller's widow. It made no mention of the little girl who was now stepping aside, clutching his hand tightly, hiding right behind his chair as they entered the canine unit's reception area. The girl had light brown hair tied in 2 thick braids, worn sneakers, and a pale pink backpack hanging from a strap. Her large dark eyes darted around, absorbing every detail. The photos of the dogs pinned to the wall, the trophies, the name tags, the table with the training schedules. But what remained silent was a special image, a large, somewhat old photo in which a young German shepherd, chest puffed out, posed next to a uniformed man, smiling with all his children. The girl stops breathing for a second. I marked every line of the dog with my gaze. The black spot on its back, the lighter tone on its paws, its gaze fixed on something outside the frame. No, it wasn't a dog. It was him. "That's Rex," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Emily squeezed his hand. "Lily," he murmured, his voice breaking, "my love, we don't know." But the girl isn't listening. You probably heard that a long time ago. Rex. His name floated in Lily's memory like a child's echo. It wasn't something learned long ago, but an ancient whisper, from nights only she remembered. Blurry fragments of a drink spilled on her pillow, of glue hitting the wall, of deep laughter mingled with barking dogs. I didn't know exactly where that feeling came from. But it hit me in the chest with such intensity that it accelerated rapidly, as if I were about to cry without understanding why. Mark left the workshop at that moment. "Emily," he greeted her, extending his hand seriously, but also with a weary warmth. "I'm Mark. We talked by email." "Yes, thank you for having us," she replied, extending her hand carefully. "This is Lily." The girl looked exactly like one, and I turned my gaze towards the board. Mark followed her gaze and felt something settling into his own inner space. "They miss him," I say in a low voice. Emily let out a brief, humorless laugh. "We've taken too much from this," I replied, "but Lily asked for it. Don't hesitate to do it. Listen, I'm not sure about betraying him, but I think we need to close something." "Close something," Mark kept repeating in his head, despite having learned that some inheritances cannot be closed, they only change shape. He led them down the corridor, explaining in a simple way what was necessary. "Rex has been different since he came back," I say. "He's been through a lot. Don't trust anyone. If someone gets too aggressive, well, if someone gets too close, we'll be able to see from now on. Nothing bad." Emily remained motionless, holding Lily close to her. "I don't want you to touch it, okay, my love?" he whispered to the little girl. "We're just going to look at it, like when we go to the cemetery to see your dad. We don't touch the cross, right?" Lily looked at him, enjoying the scene, as if the comparison didn't have the same flavor. But I didn't bring it up. However, something inside her burned with curiosity and nostalgia, a curiosity she didn't know how to define. As they reached the hallway, the other dogs barked and became frightened. Lily clung tighter to her mother, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor, where the light shone from above. Mark sent a message to the guard, who deactivated the lock on the area. The three of them entered with clear instructions. "Stay up high without touching the wall," I told him. "Don't stand in front of anyone's cage unless other thieving dogs are coming. Let's go straight to the end, okay?" As they walked, some dogs were happy to see the little girl. They moved the glue aside, played with it, and gently shook it. Lily seemed to smile, a small, sad smile, but she didn't stop. His body seemed to know where he was before his mind did. Rex sensed the change in the air before he even heard them. New smells. One familiar scent from some distant place, mingled with old flowers, clothes stored in boxes, and a men's cologne that was no longer present in the house where it had been used. Another, subtle, smelled of crayons, modeling clay, strawberry soap, and dried tears. That second smell hit him like an electric shock. It remained motionless, its legs tense and its head slightly lowered. In the grumbling, no thief, just waiting. The sound of footsteps drew closer. 3 rhythms, one firm, one uncertain, one light and restless. When they finally appeared in his field of vision, Rex didn't look first at a man nor at a woman. He looked directly at the girl. Her eyes. For a moment, the world around him became blurry. Lily didn't understand why she felt this tightness in her chest. She had never seen that dog in person, but something inside her reacted as if she had been reunited with someone she had lost. Her eyes filled with tears, as if something terrible were happening. It wasn't fear. It was an ancient sadness that didn't belong to her at all, and yet, at the same time, it did. Rex could smell it from afar. That smell. I remembered the nights when a smaller creature would get tangled in his paws, pulling it out of his ears, playing with it in his mouth, laughing with high-pitched squeaks. I remembered a deep voice that was also laughing, saying, "Be careful, Lily. Don't read so much that you start complaining. Say, 'Slow down, Rex.'" That word, slowly, tore something from his memory like a claw. Lily took another step towards the cage, partially leaving her mother behind. "Hello," she whispered. Emily held her breath. Mark stood to one side, tense, ready to talk to the girl when Rex was standing up. But Rex didn't stand up. He remained motionless, simply breathing, with his head tilted to one side, listening to that little voice that now had a different tone, clearer, more articulate, but which carried with it, hidden, the frequency of those baby babbles. Lily raised her hand, just a few centimeters, as if she were waving to someone from the other side of a window. Rex said it was a step forward. Emily stifled a little squeal. "That's enough, Lily," he exclaimed, leading her behind him. Lily, with tears I couldn't hold back, I saw her. "Mom, nothing will happen to me." Her voice was firm, but not fearful. It was as if you had overcome something the adults hadn't been able to. Mark intervened, gently but firmly. "Emily, let's calm down. Don't play hard to get. Hey, Doublegate, if you bark, we're leaving immediately." Emily is tempted, completely, not because of the dog, because of what the dog represented. That animal had been her last physical link to her husband, his inseparable companion on missions, of which she had only a superficial knowledge. The one who returned alive when the man had left. I hated him for a few days. I kept thinking, why are you here and not that? Other days I was lost, imagining that if Rex could have spoken, he would have told the truth about that night, and the official version wouldn't have been as cold as his death. And now, seeing him like this, looking casually at his daughter, tears her apart inside. Lily let go of his hand, but didn't move any further. He stood on the ground, about 5 feet from the cage, raising his chin to get a better look at Rex. "You're sad," I said. Emily started thinking, "Don't say that," but the truth caught in her throat. Because the dog, against all logic, had something in its eyes that looked far too much like human sadness. Rex approached another step, sniffing the air between the beams. The scent of desert octopus mingled with that of waxes. The deep voice of his dead human mingled with that of a living girl. His brain, accustomed to associating every stimulus with danger, was confused. But there was something about that girl's presence that, for the first time in a long time, erased the constant noise of fear. She didn't approach me like the others. He didn't hold out his hand. He didn't shout. He didn't try to give me orders. I simply stood there, my eyes filled with tears, looking at him as if I had come to someone I thought I had lost. That look, that exact way of opening her eyes, I'd seen it before. When a tiny being enters through the door of that little house with beige walls, taking out the pill again and again while the man reigns and takes pictures. Lily barely grazed the first beam with her fingertips without actually touching it. It was a minimal gesture, a small bridge spanning 2 abysses. "I remember you," she murmured, not realizing what she was saying. "I think I only remember you." Emily looked at Mark, confused. "I was very little," I softly. "I was only 2 years old when every year last year. You shouldn't." Mark negotiated without problems. "The body remembers things that the head has forgotten," he replied. Rex moved close enough that his son fell 1/2 a meter from the mall. A low growl, sometimes a murmur, vibrated in his chest. It wasn't a "I was" directed at the girl, but at everyone else. In the hallway, at the years of loneliness, at the absence of that voice that guided him. Lily swallowed hard. A tear rolled down her bed, but he didn't move away. At that precise moment, the eyes of the dog and the girl aligned with an invisible frequency. Something stirred within Rex. The tension he'd felt since the explosion only lessened. It didn't disappear, but it receded a little, as if an inner storm were raging, strangely, on the horizon of his eyes. The first contact had already been made. No music, no applause, no cameras recording. Just 3 humans containing the alien, and a dog who, for the first time in years, didn't react with anger, but with an extraordinary mixture of recognition and pain. In the following days, Lily asked to return. At first, Emily said no. It was too much. It meant dredging up a legacy that had never fully healed. But the girl insisted with stubborn calm. "Mom, he's alone," she said. "Me too." This simple phrase goes from one place to another. Because, deep down, Emily had also felt alone ever since she folded the flag and put it in a box she didn't dare open. Even when she was surrounded by people, even when her sisters visited her, even when the elderly greeted her in the shop, there was a particular kind of loneliness in having loved someone who left without saying goodbye. Rex, unknowingly, had become the recipient of all that loneliness, locked in a cage, burdened by the echo of a death that no one had explained to him. Mark, for his part, saw more than just an emotional moment on his first visit. I saw a possibility, a very faint thread, but a real one. So I did what I did best: observe. I took notes. Day 1. The presence of the girl causes a noticeable reduction in Rex's aggressive response. He doesn't bark, he doesn't show the children. He shows signs of stress, panting, dilated pupils, but he remains facing forward. He doesn't retreat to the back of the cage. Day 2. The girl visits her again. Rex anticipates her arrival. He positions himself in front of the door before they enter the hallway. He moves slightly, without lifting it from the floor. He doesn't utter a single growl. Day 3. The girl begins to speak softly. Her tone seems calm. Response: Rex leans back, maintaining eye contact. I made no comment. I immediately took the lead. I knew that, in a formal report, these things would sound sentimental. But I also knew that, in real life, affection could be as restorative as any protocol. The visits become a ritual. Lily dropped out of school, ate every few days, and asked her mother to take her to Rex. Emily initially negotiated, only once a week. Then, well, sometimes. Without explanation, I ended up doing it every day. In the hallway, the other dogs recognized the girl. Some were filled with joy, others with curiosity. But the atmosphere changed when they reached the end. Lily always sat in the same spot, on the cold ground, with her legs crossed and her backpack beside her. She discovers things that, at first, seem like childish whims: a notebook, a box of crayons, sometimes an old stuffed animal. "I'm going to tell you something today," she said to Rex, "but you have to keep quiet, okay?" Rex didn't understand the full words, but he did understand the tone. He recognized in her something he'd never seen in other trainers: patience without expectations. I didn't demand anything of him. Don't speak to him in an authoritarian tone. Simply invite him to spend time with her. He began to lie down in front of the bag, his beard resting on his paws, watching the girl move the crayons across the paper. I looked at the crayon, the cardboard, the light sweat on Lily's forehead. Every now and then, the girl would lift her sheet of paper to show him. "Look, that's you." He pointed at an awkward figure, a dog with oversized ears that looked like a colorful whip. "And this is you running with—" He stopped, swallowing. "With my dad." Rex didn't understand the word dad, but when he saw the human silhouette in his mouth, something was hidden in his chest. It was like seeing the blurry reflection of something his memory couldn't name. The man in Lily's drawings always had the same smile as in the old photographs. The girl tried to collect the drawings from the suitcase with some tape Mark had secretly given her. 1, 2, 3, done. The inside of Rex's cage was full of crumpled paper, colored with bold strokes. The other coaches cheated on average. "You look friendlier in the canine unit," he said, something as he put it on with a bunch of straps over his shoulder. But nothing could deny the obvious. The corporation's most aggressive dog didn't attack the government when someone walked by, at least not when Lily was nearby. At night, when the corridor was empty and the lights went out one by one, the sounds remained, vibrating faintly under the emergency light. Rex, who used to spend the dark hours running restlessly and throwing himself against the beams at the slightest noise, now found himself experiencing moments of stillness. He stood before the papers, staring at them intently, as if expecting the man in the drawing to move at once. Sometimes the absence of a real man, a storm raging through the city, made him fidget, his heart racing and his breath coming in short gasps. The storms were an invisible enemy. The sound of real storms mingled in his brain with the sound of explosions. Every flash of lightning in the sky reminded him of the brutal white light that lasted only a few seconds the day everything changed. When he left, he ran around inside the cramped space of his cage, bumping into the walls and barking into nothing. The guards watched him in hushed tones. Some held him by the outside chain to try to calm him down. Others banged on the door with their feet. Nothing worked. Until the night the storm coincided with a visit. It was already late. The sky had been dark since the afternoon, with low, dense clouds covering the city like dusty blankets. The air cooled the rain before the first drop fell. Mark checked the forecast on his phone and thought it probably wasn't a good idea for Emily and Lily to go out. But just as he was about to call them, the front door opened and the two of them appeared, dripping wet with hair, laughing nervously. "The truck was late, but we made it," Emily said, shaking the water off the flame. Lily wore a yellow raincoat that was much too big for her. Her trains were dripping. Her nose was red from the cold, but her eyes sparkled every time she said the same name. "Can we see it?" Mark paused for a second, glancing at the rain radar on his screen. There was no way to make the windows vibrate. "If things get too bad, we're leaving," he warned. It doesn't handle storms well." Emily looked at him with a mixture of understanding and pity. "No one copes well with storms when they have lived through what they have lived through," he said. In the hallway, the dogs were agitated. Many were barking incessantly, some were attacking. The electricity from the storm was palpable in the air, giving Emily goosebumps. But when they reach Rex's cage, they'll find something new. The dog wasn't standing still, nor was it running. There was a sheep on the corner, keeping watch. Don't steal. It was just breathing as if it had run for miles. Its pupils were so dilated you couldn't see the color of its eyes. Lily stopped dreaming. She had seen him furious, alert, curious. Never like this. Devastated. "Rex," she whispered, dropping her backpack at his feet. The next truth was so devastating it seemed to tear the building apart. The light flickered for a moment. Rex jumped to her feet, gripped by panic. She ran for the door and was pressed against the beams with a force that made the entire structure vibrate. The girl said, taking a step back, lost in thought. Emily instinctively hugged her. "Tell me," Mark murmured, tense. Rex didn't see them. In his mind, the corridor had transformed once again into that dirt road on the outskirts of a town, where jagged roofs flew through the cracks, where human screams mingled with the sound of gunfire. I searched for my human self. I searched for him in the murmur, in the shadows, among the running silhouettes. I didn't find him. Another thunderclap. Another explosion on their records. Lily broke free from her mother's embrace and took a step forward, her heart beating so hard that her chest hurt. "Rex!" she shouted, raising her voice for the first time. The name cut through the noise like a clear beam. Rex remained motionless, his body pressed against the beams. Something in that tone reminded me of another voice, more serious, that simply shouted, "Rex, over here! Rex, with me!" He wasn't there at all. But the intention, the desperation, they were identical. Lily, her hands ready, ran back to the cage, this time closer than ever. Her fingertips brushed against the inside of the bag. Emily was about to pull her, but Mark raised an arm, a point somewhere between professional and instinctive. "Wait," he whispered, "look." The girl, her voice breaking, began to speak rapidly, as if the words were escaping her unfiltered. "You're not there, okay? You're not there, Rex. You're here, with me. Hey, I know you get scared when it's true. Me too. But my dad thought storms were just clouds fighting. No bombs, no bad guys, just clouds." Emily felt things were slipping out of her control. That phrase had come out of her mouth a long time ago. If only she had listened to her husband once, when Lily was a baby. A violent storm woke her up crying. "It's the car," he said, pacing the room and repeating the same thing in the same soft voice the little girl was using now. Rex didn't understand clouds or bombs or bad guys, but I understood the rhythm of that voice. He understood the cadence he remembered from nights under the blanket, listening to his human whisper things to him while stroking him behind the ear. Immediately, very quickly, the dog had to retreat to the rafters. Its breathing was still ragged, but it wasn't a cry of outright panic. It was more like someone who has just woken up from a nightmare and, in the confusion, recognizes a familiar smell in the room. Lily reached for the bag. "I'm here," I say. "I'm not going to leave you alone." Rex sniffed the tips of those little fingers. He could hear the fear, alone, but not directed at him, rather shared with him. It was a fear like a storm, with great roars, of losing again something he was barely getting back. Contrary to everything his instinct has learned in recent years, against the automatic reactions that make him act without thinking, I do something new. I take another step, and from there I move forward. His whiskers brushed against Lily's skin. The girl kept the alien alive, but she didn't retreat. I hope this brief contact only lasted a few seconds. It was like closing a circuit that had remained incomplete the day the world exploded in the desert. Mark felt a burning sensation in his eyes that he refused to share. Emily brought a hand to her mouth, savoring a moment alone. Rex remained like that, his head resting against the cold metal, inhaling the girl's scent, while another real man walked away, his voice hoarse. I tensed, but I didn't jump. In the hallway, he was still anchored by that tiny presence on the other side of the cage. That was the first day the storm didn't affect him at all. From then on, our real nights became extraordinarily more bearable, as long as Lily wasn't around that day. Mark noticed that too. Positive emotional stimulation associated with a traumatic stimulus. The girl's presence seems to create an anchor in the gift for Rex. If the psychologist, who, in theory, preserved the unit, commented on it, but it was just a question for his eyes, and I said, "Sometimes it happens. Animals cling to specific figures that give them back their lost sense of security. It's strange here that the girl died at the hands of her caregiver, isn't it?" "Yes," Mark replied. "So it's not strange, of course. The poetic aspect. How do you want to see it?" But no one, not even Mark, was prepared for what he would discover a few weeks later. It was an absurd detail, a crumpled photo on the background of an old rug. I was looking for some old reports when I saw it. A current letter-size sheet of paper, folded in half, held together with plastic and a clear sleeve. It was a routine document, the military family's visit to the base before their deployment. The photo, taken on a sunny day, showed a group of people, wives, young girls, relaxed officers, and some dogs. Among them, clearly recognizable, was Rex, younger, with slightly lighter fur. To one side, crouching and smiling, was Sergeant Miller. And in the sergeant's arms, a little girl with long braids and a yellow dress, giggling as she gently stroked a dog's ear. The image had a warmth that hurt. It wasn't a photo of a hero and his war buddy, it was a photo of a family. Mark stared at it like a mouse. His fingers were gripping the plastic. She knows it, he thought, with a clarity that took his breath away. It wasn't simply a new connection, it was an ancient memory, buried deep within their minds. Rex remembered the smell of a baby. Lily remembered the feeling of a wet horse in her bed. Now they were reunited without even knowing it. I picked up the photo very carefully, as if it could be destroyed with the slightest mishandling. I placed it on a separate rug and went straight to find Emily. I was in the waiting room, with Lily doing her homework next to me, her fingers on the table, her tongue sticking out a little as she worked through some problems. "I have to show you something." Mark says in the neutral voice of someone who knows he is about to open another treasure chest. Emily followed him to his workshop, intrigued. Lily wanted to get up, but her mother said, "Finish your homework, my love. We'll be right back and we'll go with Rex." Once inside and with the door closed, Mark placed the photo on the desk, turning it towards Emily. It seemed, and at first I didn't react. I saw the zipper, the seal on the base, the jumble of figures. Then her gaze settled on her husband's face, younger, less tired, holding something small in his arms that was writhing with laughter. His brother immediately covered his mouth. His eyes instantly filled with tears. "God," she whispered, "you didn't wake me from this visit." Rex was sitting to one side, his steel tongue pressed against her in a blurry motion. "Lily, did you know Rex?" Mark asked, giving voice to what the image screamed. "It wasn't just a story you made up. It wasn't like he talked about it. He's here. I touched him. I played with him." Emily stood motionless, tears streaming down her face. I didn't. I was wrong. So many things during this time, yes." She laughs humorously. "I suppose the brain has space when there is too much pain." She pointed to the little girl in the photo, a miniature version of Lily. "I was 2 years old. I always thought I wouldn't remember anything. But when we started talking to my dad a little while later, I asked about the big dog. I thought I had dreamed it, that I had seen it in pictures and that was it. But no, that's it, right?" Tick. "It's him." They looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. On the wall, a clock ticked the time with a sound too loud for such a small workshop. "Are you going to decide?" Emily finally asked. "Lily, yes, but I think someone else should say it first," Mark replied. "Someone who understands this whole story the least." I took the picture and went up the hallway. Standing in front of Rex's cage, the girl continued her task, this time sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Every now and then she glanced up at the dog, who watched her silently from inside, his head tilted to one side. Mark climbed onto the side of the cage and, with slow movements, picked up the photo that was among Lily's drawings, in a space that had been left free. Rex greased the new paper. I looked at the old octopus, the plastic, the dried paint. But as I opened my eyes wide enough to focus the image, something inside him completely crumbled. There he was, with the language of strength, youth, power. There was his human, smiling. And there, in that human's arms, a miniature of the girl who was now sitting apart, taking numbers out in a notebook. Her brain, filled with disconnected fragments of that scene, finally managed to grasp a clear reference. What had always been a vague sensation, the baby's color, the high-pitched laughter, the tiny hands trying to reach her neck, took shape. He let out a soft whimper, a sound never before heard in that unit. It wasn't a growl, nor a bark. It was a kind of loud yet soft snore. Lily looked up, surprised. "What happened?" he asked, approaching her. Mark pointed to the photo. "Come here, Lily. I need to show you something." The girl was standing next to him, on the other side of the mall. When I saw the picture, I saw the scene. It took her a few seconds to realize what was coming. Her father, younger, with the tattoos just beginning to show on his sleeve. With that smile she knew more from photographs than from her own memories. And in his arms, a baby who looked so much like her. "Is it me?" he whispered, his voice almost inaudible. Emily, who had just arrived in the country at that moment, burst into tears. "Yes, my love," she confirmed, her voice breaking. "That day we went to see Dad at work, and you met Rex. Will he help you? Even a little?" Lily closed her eyes, as if searching for something in the shadows of her mind. And then fragments. The smell of grass, the sun reflecting it in your eyes, the feel of rough fur under your small hands, a loud bark that doesn't frighten you, a bell that makes you cry again. His father's laughter, loud and all-encompassing. Her lips trembled. I dreamed about this," he said. "I dreamed about a dog like this with my dad and me. I thought it was just a dream, but it's real." Rex didn't understand those words, but he sensed the change in the atmosphere. The smell of sadness intensified, but it wasn't the loneliness and despair that always hung in his cage. It was a shared sadness, heavy with memories.
If you approach the shopping center, her eyes closed in Lily's eyes in the photo upon her return. Her brain has a definite connection. The miniature in the image and the girl now were the same creature, grown up but with the same background scent.
The same sparkle in her eyes. Soon, all the absences converged on one point: the human being who was not there, the baby who had been so long to see, the dog that had fallen to the ground. Lily gently rested the front of the bag on it, next to Rex's neck. "You lost my dad too," she whispered, "not just me and my mom." The three of them, dog, girl, woman, fell there, united by a piece of cold metal, by an old photograph, and by a pain that, for the first time, felt less unbearable when shared. Mark watched them with a lump in his throat, feeling as if something were floating in his chest. He remembered his own story, his own loss, what he had never wanted to tell anyone in the unit. For the first time, he allowed himself to think, "I'm probably not alone in this." From that day on, Rex's transformation accelerated. It wasn't magic or perfect. There were setbacks, days when he would grow for no apparent reason, nights when the real ones made him lose control. But he wasn't the unpredictable monster everyone feared. He began to obey small instructions that he only accepted from Lily. When Mark said he was going to be seated from the start, Rex looked at him suspiciously. But if the girl, mimicking her father's tone, who seemed oblivious, said, "Rex, sit down, please," the dog hesitated, looked at the bag, the balance in his brain wavered, and finally, with a sigh that seemed human, he crossed his paws and sat down. When Lily paused to slide her hand over the bag, Rex fought the urge to push. He only touched the metal with his nose, taking a deep breath, like someone who had just discovered that not all contact ends in pain. The coaches watched from the sidelines in disbelief. "She doesn't pay any attention to us," they said, "but with her." Mark smiled without boasting. "She's your link to the past," he explained, "to the life I lost." One afternoon, Emily took home an old gift she had decided to keep for years, a gray T-shirt of her husband's, one of those that did not contain detergent, like the unique mixture of skin, sweat, and cologne that defined his personality. The one closest to the fence. Rex felt a shiver run through his body. That smell. It was the direct thread to the desert, to the house, to the basement where the three of them, man, dog, and baby, were hiding, watching television in the background. He howled suddenly with a booming voice, as if he had just found a lost trail. It was not a solemn audience, nor a bell of recognition. Lily, her eyes shining, held one end of the shirt while her mother held the other. Between them they placed Mark, who carefully slipped through the gap between the cage and the bag, a sort of safety tray, and positioned it inside the cage, in a corner. That night, for the first time since his arrival at this unit, Rex slept with his head bent over something that reminded him of home. Time continued to pass. Perhaps, if things had gotten worse, that would have been enough. A girl visiting a traumatized dog, helping him calm his inner turmoil while they both wept, each in their own way, for an absent man. But life, fate, bad luck, the past, doesn't usually settle for quiet stories. It always has an ace up its sleeve. It came in the form of a particularly fierce storm, a power outage, and a door left ajar. That day, Mark wasn't at the station. He'd been sent to another precinct to evaluate an officer. Emily decided then to take Lily with her. She'd established such a comforting routine that breaking it felt worse than facing Lily in the rain. By mid-afternoon, the sky was almost black. The wind swayed the trees along the street. The sound of sirens mingled with that of real sirens. The city was restless. At the unit, 2 officers checked the generators on their own and found the power. Others secured the equipment. The regular guard on duty in the K-9 unit's corridor, distracted by a problem at home, swiped his card through the reader and opened the door, but didn't wait for the internal lock to fully engage. The door remained ajar, not completely closed. This type of error usually goes unnoticed until someone brutally detects it. Emily and Lily crossed the reception desk, greeting them by heart. I didn't go to see Mark, but I knew the way. "Let's go quickly, okay?" I say, Emily. "The storm is getting bad." In the hallway, the barking was chaotic. Some dogs pounded the riverbanks in desperation. Others leaped about as if sensing something more than the rain. The light flickered faintly, softened by the wind that scattered it. Rex, ever since he was little, had felt the electricity in the air. His body knew, even before his mind, that this day would be different. I smelled rain mixed with something metallic, a sensation that made my skin redden. When Emily and Lily's footsteps echoed in the background, her heart raced for another reason. She hurried to the door, waiting for the small face that always appeared at the same time. Lily also started running, with her backpack hanging off her back, her pants wet, and a nervous smile on her face. "Rex!" he shouted. Another clap of thunder. The lights went out for a moment, plunging everything into complete darkness. In that brief interval, a sound echoed in the hallway, the faint creak of a lock that never quite closed. When the emergency generator kicked in, with flashing orange lights, the scene had changed. An old tree, planted right in the side yard of the building, succumbed to the wind. Its trunk snapped and crashed against the structure, breaking part of the outer fence and striking the wall adjacent to the K-9 unit's corridor. The impact shook the entire building, damaging beams and dislodging 2 worn-out girders. The high-security door, which he was guarding, was not properly closed. It opened just a few centimeters more, enough for a powerful paw to push it open from the inside. Confused, scared, with the noise of the tree falling on his head and the sound of a bomb, Rex acted out of pure survival instinct. He fled. He pushed against its inner spiral, which, weakened, gave way more than usual. He forced the opening open with his body, scraping the sides, and freed the chain with a roar of effort. The Kando, loosely secured, revived. Soon, after years of metal, you'll have the corridor clear in front of you. The other dogs barked like crazy, some out of fear, others from the adrenaline rush of seeing one of their own running wild. The emergency lights, painted orange, cast long shadows. Rex in the ledger. His first impulse was the sound of storms, of autumn, of the noises that chased him from the desert. I ran toward the exit. At that precise moment, Lily was half a mile away, still standing in the cage, unaware that it did not exist as a barrier. I saw a dark figure moving towards her at full speed. Any other child would have screamed and run in the opposite direction, but she recognized the smell, the movement, the shape of the ears, even amidst the chaos. "Rex!" she whispered, remaining silent. Emily, who was just a few steps away, saw the scene and shouted, "Lily, behind!" Her voice was lost in the crowd and the noise of objects falling somewhere in the building. Rex stopped dead in his tracks just inches from the girl. His mind wavered between 2 realities. One, he was in that ruined village, a tiny figure amidst the octopus, a body sprawled to one side, bleeding in the sand. Then he was in the apartment hallway, a soaked little girl looking at him with the same eyes as the baby in the photograph. During an endless bark, my body doesn't know what to do. But fear wasn't the only instinct she had. Another focus, buried under layers of trauma, emerged with unexpected force: the impulse to protect. In the memory of the desert, there was also an attempt at protection. He ran to his human when he saw him fall, barked at the shadows, tried to drag him through the fur. Had they fallen together, their bodies would have been violently torn apart. I hadn't been able to save him. Now, in the presence of the girl, the universe embarks on a second mission. Lily slowly raised her hand and placed it on the dog's arm. I felt the trembling in my muscles, the palpable tension. I knew that part of him wanted to keep running. But I also felt something else, a decision. "Let's go," I say, with an absurd calmness for the situation. "Don't go alone, let's go together." Emily arrived at their place with her heart in her mouth. "Lily," he gasped, "are you crazy? Get away!" But before she could speak, a terrible crash echoed overhead. The fallen tree trunk continued to slide, tearing off more pieces. A section fell into the false light of the hallway, which gave way, falling back to its original position. Everything happened very quickly. Emily tried to shield her daughter with her body. Lily instinctively ducked. Rex lunged backward. The dog charged at the girl from the side, pushing her against the wall and away from the collapsing area. The false ceiling, fluorescent tubes, and part of the metal structure fell right where, a second before, Lily had stood. The noise was deafening. The octopus filled the hallway. Shouts, barking, alarms. Emily lost her bearings. I felt a blow to my shoulder, fell to the ground, and rolled. Her first word, coincidentally, was her daughter's name. "Lily!" He coughed for the octopus, trying to sit up with a sharp pain in his arm. I saw nothing, only shadows through the thick cloud. He heard desperate barking, metallic clangs, running footsteps. "Here!" Her daughter's voice came from somewhere, fearful but alive. "Mom, here!" Emily crawled as fast as she could toward the sound. Her brothers first touched the rough, hot, and soaked coat. Then the yellow waterproof screen. As the cloud of octopuses began to dissipate, the scene emerged. Lily was huddled against the wall, with a couple of scratches on the stove, motionless but unharmed. In front of her, completely covering her, lay Rex. A beam from the ceiling had knocked him to the ground. He had a deep wound in his side, from which blood gushed, mixing with the octopus and the rain that seeped through the opening in the wall. Lily didn't cry because of the blow. She cried because of the dog. "No, no, Rex," she stammered, touching her head with her octopus-stained hands. "Please, don't worry. Don't abandon me too." Rex's eyes, glazed with pain, struggled to focus on his face. Every breath hurt. He felt the weight of the beam pressing down on part of his body. But despite everything, his glue only moved once, hitting the ground with a weak thud. I had already failed once. Not this time. At that moment, Mark ran out, having returned to report the disaster by radio, his heart pounding even before he saw the building. The scene struck me like a disturbing déjà vu. Rubble, screams, an octopus, an adult body trying to protect another. For a moment, the image from years ago overlapped with the present. But this time there was time. "Get the dog out!" he shouted, jumping onto the wheels next to Rex, "and the girl now!" Other officers arrived, carefully lifting the collapsed structure. They first pulled Lily out, leaving Emily behind. When they tried to move Rex, he growled weakly, more out of reflex than friendliness. "Relax, old man," Mark whispered, stroking his head for the first time without fear of being bitten. "I've got you. I won't let it happen again." That promise wasn't just made to Rex. There's also the memory of another person lost in another scene of chaos.